Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. We've mentioned a lot of things about the 2020 presidential election on this channel, but one of the things we have not done is cover the candidacy of Justin Amash. Really, we would say the potential presidential run for Justin Amash on the Libertarian ticket, mind you. Justin Amash is, of course, the representative from the 3rd Congressional District in Michigan, and he holds that seat as a Republican, but he self-identifies as a Libertarian, and there's been a lot of talk about Justin Amash running as a Libertarian for the presidency. We did an upload on this channel recently about Representative Joe Walsh, who was formerly in Congress, formerly representing the 8th District of Illinois, running for the presidency as a Libertarian ticket. And on the Libertarian ticket, we should say, the reason why I mentioned that is a lot of people who end up becoming the Libertarian nominee are self-identified Republicans, and this is something that we really need to note, like this kind of trend that's been going on. We even talked about Rand Paul running on the Libertarian ticket, and that wasn't my own original idea. I mean, that was a huge part of the national libertarian conversation. This is exactly what Darrell W. Perry was talking about in 2015 when he was saying the Libertarians are using a lot of Republicans in their presidential primaries. They're using a lot of Republicans to try and, what Darrell Perry called, use them as a shiny thing to attract votes. And even if you look at Gary Johnson, 2-term Republican governor of New Mexico, even if you look at William Weld, his running mate in 2016, also a former Republican governor of Massachusetts. One of the things, though, where I would kind of disagree with Darrell Perry is that he would refer to people who would be running in that position like Weld and Johnson and maybe Justin Amash as not real libertarians. And I think that we just sort of have to recognize that that's a fact of life that we have now. When you're dealing with some of these, third parties in the general election, especially the Libertarian Party, you're going to be kind of seeing the lines start to blur. And Justin Amash is a perfect example of that. He is someone who is in Congress as a Republican, but he totally welcomes the identity of the Libertarian name. And if you remember, though, Ron Paul did not do that in his later years in Congress. Of course, Ron Paul ran for the presidency in 1988 as a Libertarian, but when he was running in 2008 and 2012, he didn't want to use the word. He said, other people are calling me that. I don't self-identify as that. He was running for the Republican nomination. What do we make of Justin Amash? Representative from Michigan, Grand Rapids area. He is the descendant of Christian Arab immigrants. What do we make of this rising star of the Libertarian Party? I mean, he has a very bold platform. He makes a lot of bold statements. He was the only person to vote against, aid for the Flint water crisis. He was a person who voted against having a national suicide prevention hotline where you just dial 3 numbers and then you can contact to a suicide prevention hotline specialist. He was opposed to that. For what? For what reason? The Constitution. I mean, that's very simple. He says that it's unconstitutional. The Constitution does not call for things like social charity. And also, I mean, that's just sort of the fact of the matter. I mean, that's the heart and soul. The Constitution does not call for social charity. And if you think that he's alone in that, he's not. We had a president named Grover Cleveland that was all about that. Grover Cleveland was the person who vetoed the Texas Seed Bill, saying that the Constitution didn't call for social charity. And this revolved about, there was a drought in Texas and the farmers, were going through some very tough conditions. And Grover Cleveland vetoed the Texas Seed Bill. He was like, this is an unconstitutional thing. We have to follow the law. And instead, he called on the farmers of America to donate things through their own charitable means. It's a very large school of thought that we see in the Libertarian Party, as well as other political parties as well. Of course, Grover Cleveland wasn't president as a Libertarian. One of the things, though, that we need to note with that is an arguable school of thought. Like, in 2011, I was listening to lots of Ron Paul. Many of us were. It was Ron Paul mania. And he was just like, if the Constitution doesn't call for it, people should not be doing it. You can't just sort of dance around the law because you're just going to get away with it. That's bad. It's like taking the pair of safety scissors around the Constitution and you're just trying to do whatever you want because you're going to get away with it. That's wrong, and it's unconstitutional, unjustifiable, and I was on board with all of that. I followed the message completely, and it's a very large school of thought that Justin Amash is supporting. And Justin Amash has been even endorsed by Ron Paul in the past. But it's like, when I say it's arguable, the other side of the coin is, that stuff is not, people are not in consensus. Not all legal experts are in consensus. Not all scholars are in consensus. Not all politicians and lawmakers are in consensus about that interpretation of the law. We have these things called the implied powers, the Hamiltonian school of thought, where it's like, promote the general welfare. That the government has the right to promote the general welfare as long as it doesn't infringe upon states' rights, as long as it doesn't infringe upon individual rights, the 9th and 10th Amendments. So it's like, if you were to say something, Flint water crisis, suicide prevention hotline, farmers in Texas are going through a drought, the federal government has every right to call for social charity, as long as they don't cut off state operations or individual operations, as long as they don't cut off state charities and individual charities, then the government, we're talking about the federal government now, can also do things like social charity. And Ron Paul really expands this to things like FEMA, expanding this to things like the FAA, the TSA, all of these things. And it seems like Justin Amash is much more in accordance with that. Right now, I think we're experiencing a very large kind of shift in the Libertarian Party. This is another reason why I was opposed to Darrell W. Perry's comment that someone like Justin Amash would not be a real libertarian, someone who is in Congress as a Republican, and then would just be the shiny thing to attract votes. Why? Because the Libertarians have expanded. They are growing. Gary Johnson shattered the record for votes in the Libertarian Party. Yeah, he didn't get the 5%. I believe he got 4.4 million votes, 3% of the popular vote. He didn't get the 5% vote that would qualify for federal matching funds. But the Libertarians are growing in terms of numbers. They are growing in terms of influence. Even Austin Peterson, the former presidential candidate, had a near victory in the state of Missouri when he was running for the Senate. And once again, he was running as a Republican, not on the Libertarian ticket. So once again, the lines have blurred a little, and that's just what we're going to be seeing. We're going to see a little bit of blurred lines in between the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party. And to an extent, back in 2008, if I recall, Mike Gravel, the senator who is running for the presidency now on the Democratic ticket, and Mike Gravel was in the Senate as a Democrat, but I believe he was actually trying to seek the Libertarian nomination as well. And that's when I really learned that politics are not just about left and right. It's kind of like coming full circle. It's like different sides of the circle. There are certain certain Democrats that Libertarians can join together with. There are certain Republicans that Libertarians can join together with. And we gave some examples right there very easily. Mike Gravel, as well as Ron Paul, Austin Peterson, Justin Amash. The lines can blur very easily, and people can come together. And that's one of the biggest things that I have been talking about for a long time, is that we need to find some sort of libertarian, progressive, conservative, green alliance. Like these third parties can come together, and some of the kind of more outlying members of the Democrats and the Republicans can all join together, and you can kind of create this sort of third party alliance. And if you think that that's not possible, and something like that cannot gain power, it really is. It happens all the time in the state and local elections. But when we want to talk about Justin Amash, what would be his chances of winning the Libertarian nomination? Very, very possibly he would do very well. I definitely think he would do better than somebody like Representative Joe Walsh, who is kind of coming at this from a more obscure platform, trash-talking Donald Trump and trying to present himself as some sort of anti-establishment Republican Libertarian hybrid, whereas we don't really need the kind of wacky version of that when you have somebody like Justin Amash who would be able to do that in a little bit more of an articulate fashion, because Joe Walsh carries some baggage. Justin Amash is somebody who could actually bring the libertarian platform to a different level. And that's the other thing you need to say about libertarians, is they are dealing with a wide variety of ideas, ideologies, philosophies, schools of thought, it's all been pulled into one. The Libertarian Party is so big now, it's not just a list of 10 bullet points on an index card. No, the Libertarian Party is kind of grown to something where they have different sections and factions within the Libertarian Party as well. The anarchists, the minarchists, the classic liberals, the constitutionalists, which it seems like Justin Amash would fall into the constitutionalist category. But I do have to insist, though, that when we are listening to something like that, like we said about, the social charity thing and that it's unconstitutional, we should not do that, that's a very difficult thing to kind of present as a fact. I mean, I'm fully aware that there are multiple schools of thought within the Libertarian Party. It's an interpretation. I'm not saying that Justin Amash is wrong. Absolutely not. It is arguable. I mean, this is the way that we kind of view the law. There are two sides to the argument, and while someone like Justin Amash would have the more constitutional libertarian argument, there are going to be other people on the other side who kind of have more of the progressive, implied powers, Hamiltonian argument that we've kind of already gone through. So those are just some of the things that we need to bear in mind. This is an arguable thing with the law. Furthermore, another thing that kind of expands in kind of contrast to Justin Amash's platform, that the government should not be doing this because it's unconstitutional, is that the Constitution is not only the articles and the amendments. It's not only the preamble and Article 1, Article 2, and all that. It's not only the Bill of Rights and the remaining amendments. The Constitution is also connected to Supreme Court cases that have been going on for the last 200 and some odd years. I mean, and everything in the Constitution is evolving based on the results of these Supreme Court cases. And we talk about this very clearly when we're bringing up the Second Amendment. People love to bring up United States versus Heller and United States versus Miller and talk about how the Second Amendment has evolved over time. All of it has. So when people start talking about how something is unconstitutional, first, it's like, you can challenge them on that. It's just like, well, like, excuse me, are you a lawyer? Like, what Supreme Court case can you cite that's going to be in favor of that? Because do you know, and also you in the audience and all of us, we can kind of read up on this stuff. How does the Supreme Court influence the definition of what is constitutional or unconstitutional? You see this very clearly with Brown versus Board of Education. I mean, we talk about this stuff with Plessy versus Ferguson and Dred Scott and all about how the courts can influence the definitions of what are constitutional and unconstitutional. So, what do you make, though, of a guy like Justin Amash? Well, I can say that the Libertarians are going to need someone who can do very well. If they want to continue the party forward, I think that they're going to need someone who can have a strong chance, who has the articulate message that can kind of attract people in. And we're also going to be seeing that there are going to be candidates that are going to be coming from a variety of backgrounds. They might be Republicans in most of their career and running on the Libertarian ticket in the 2020 election. One point, though, to give, some counterbalance to the discussion is, are the Libertarians relying too much on Republicans to try and just kind of play some devil's advocate? Why aren't they going with more people who have been lifelong Libertarians, members of the party, trying to get involved in the state and local elections? Why are they only going with Republicans for their presidential nominations? Gary Johnson, 2016. Gary Johnson, 2012. I mean, the former Republican governor of New Mexico. And actually, Gary Johnson and William Weld, when they ran for president together, like, they were the first governor tickets since 1948 or something like that. And it's like, you can see why. You can see why we don't have too many governor tickets, because to choose a running mate, you need to choose someone that's going to make you look like a giant. And you also need to choose someone that's going to make you impeachable. But the Libertarians aren't so focused on winning the nomination as they are about gaining the votes, like the 5% of the popular vote. So you need someone that's going to make you look like a giant. And William Weld did not do that for Gary Johnson. He's a little bit more articulate. He's a little bit more intellectual. He certainly didn't have the Aleppo moments. He certainly was able to name a world leader that he liked, choosing Shimon Peres nonetheless. Would Justin Amash do well as someone like a running mate rather than a presidential contender? He definitely could fill the role, but the question is, what really do the Libertarians want to do? Do they want to choose a lifelong Libertarian, or do they want to choose a Republican? I mean, Justin Amash is pretty much like saying that he is a rhino Republican in name only. He says he's a libertarian. He has always been a libertarian. He might be in Congress because, it's easier to get in as a Republican than it is a libertarian. But he has a libertarian platform. And he does have that type of constitutionalist platform that is very appealing to a lot of people. Let's not kid ourselves. Somebody like Adam Kokesh is going to have a very difficult time running with an anarcho-capitalist message. And that's a very, very important thing that we need to be focusing in on. The anarcho-capitalists are going to have quite a difficult time trying to get their message across on a national level. We're talking about no borders. We're talking about not acknowledging the state at all. And this is one of the things that the Libertarian Party is under a lot of fire for, endorsing illegal immigration. I mean, there are a variety of schools of thought within this particular issue in the Libertarian Party itself. For example, Darrell W. Perry in 2015 said very clearly, the wet foot, dry foot rule, if you're in America and you have dry feet, you have the right to stay. Meaning like someone coming from Cuba or Mexico, if your feet are still wet, you can send them back. That was his idea, not mine. I don't subscribe to that. I mean, we do have to live in a world with borders, passports, and international law. But it's like Adam Kokesh, who is someone who's been working on this for a long time, is a guy who said very clearly that he does not want to endorse the state in any fashion. So, he's pro-illegal immigration. He's pro-having people coming into the country, without going through the proper channels, because to do so, to have any sort of international law, you have to acknowledge the existence of the state. You have to acknowledge the power of governments. I mean, and I would really recommend that people would watch his debate with Stefan Molyneux when Adam Kokesh gives kind of, his platform on undocumented individuals and illegal immigration. I'm not a Stefan Molyneux fan. I just think that's where you get a chance to hear Adam Kokesh discussing some of these things. When we're dealing with Justin Amash, is his brand of constitutionalism something that's going to become a relic of the past? Or is the general public and the Libertarian Party leaning away from that into something more of the anarcho-capitalist tradition? Because some of the guys that I mentioned, Adam Kokesh and Darrell W. Perry, they are staunch anarcho-capitalists. I believe Stefan Molyneux used to be an anarcho-capitalist, but he's kind of drifted away from that. But that's what people are really talking about. And it's not only the concept of we're going to have societies run by a series of competing agencies. We're going to have that Dave Rubin school of thought where we don't need regulations. People will just leave reviews on Yelp and stuff. Is that the thing that the libertarians are really going to be going with? Well, when you break it down into the terms of libertarian secessionism, that's something that's kind of catching on a little bit more. The secessionists are more just like, you have the right to secede from a government if you don't follow the rules. You are terminating the agreements. That's the type of school of thought that might be gaining a little bit more traction than saying we want to have a society run by a series of competing agencies. That's the stuff that I feel that I don't think that that's going to stick around too long. I'm sure it will always be there as long as there is a Libertarian Party. People are going to want to have societies run by competing agencies. But if you actually kind of entertain just libertarian secessionism, you put a fence around your property and you say this is now sovereign land. Matt Zwolinski, the theorist, talked about this very clearly. He said, the reason why you have a right to do that is because there is enough land to go around. But that you forfeit, that you say you're not paying taxes, that means you don't pay for the roads. You're not going to be leaving that little property that you put your fence around. You're not using the roads. You won't be using the town water. You won't be using any of the facilities. You have seceded and you are in your own zone. And this does happen in extreme rural areas. And it was something similar, like, I forget the guy's name. It was something like Waco, but like the government chose not to invade his property, so he actually kind of is some sort of seceded thing somewhere out west where something like that actually happened. I can definitely say that that's going to be some strong counterbalance to Justin Amash's constitutional platform and about, Justin Amash is promoting himself as a very constitutionalist libertarian. And I think that that's going to be something that people can sort themselves out in the debates. I think that the constitutionalists are definitely going to get more mainstream coverage. I don't even know how much the MSM is going to want to entertain the anarcho-capitalists and the libertarian secessionists at all. All I tried to say was that libertarian secessionism is more feasible than an anarcho-capitalism. But the constitutionalist message that Justin Amash is promoting is definitely going to get more coverage on CNN and MSNBC and Fox News. And you might be shaking your head and be like, what's the big deal about those crappy networks? All they do is lie anyway. Well, they are a platform that candidates will use. I mean, all the major candidates right now want to be on some of these talk show networks. All of these candidates want a bigger platform so they can connect with voters and promote their message and get contributions and this, that, and the other. You get the idea, you know the drill. Justin Amash definitely has a more practical message than some of this anarcho-capitalist thought. And I mean, it's very difficult to know what exactly the anarcho-capitalist's end goal is, because somebody like Adam Kokesh is talking about dissolving the federal government on the first day. On the first day in office, he wants to sign an executive order to dissolve the federal government. Well, is that ever going to happen? I mean, are these just people who are putting out some far-out ideas that they are never going to be accountable for because they won't be able to put them into action? I mean, yes, it's very extreme. Yes, it gets you talking about it. We're talking about them right now. But is that something that's actually going to happen? You could actually make a fair case that a lot of the things that Justin Amash is talking about might not actually happen because constitutionalism, the constitutionalist libertarians, wanted to scale the government back to the 1808 platform, the way the government was in 1808. This was kind of in the fine print of some of Ron Paul's material back in 2011, and people are like, well, now wait a second, I mean, even if you have a good argument for that, that's not even possible now. Impossible. And the other side, I mean, Justin Amash is not completely on board with that 100%. But that's just sort of saying that he has a similar school of thought that follows that tradition, or a similar school of thought that follows those policies. What we can say about somebody like Justin Amash is that a lot of what he's promoting is not far out completely. A lot of what he's promoting is not just wacky stuff that he came up with in his basement. I mean, it's a defendable platform, but it is an arguable platform. And we have to be very, very careful when we're listening to people who are just like, that's unconstitutional, we should not do it. Justin Amash says this all the time. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America. Yes, but remember, there's another side of the coin. There's that implied power sign of the coin. There is the school of thought where it's like the government can do more than what's written. I mean, promoting the general welfare and providing for the common defense. That's why those things happen. It's not just that the way that the constitutionalists present it as people are just ignoring the law and that they're getting away with it. That does happen sometimes. Bill Clinton violated the War Powers Act and some examples of things like that. But people are also using things like providing for the common defense and promoting the general welfare. They're using the implied powers. Alexander Hamilton was all about this. That's why I refer to it as the Hamiltonian school of thought. It's like, and it's not nonsense, it's not silliness. It's an actual, arguable standpoint that is in contrast to the constitutional libertarian standpoint that Justin Amash, we're talking about Amash now, Justin Amash is talking about. Alright, well, that's my little rant on Justin Amash and the constitutional libertarians, as well as some of the other libertarian candidates from the past, present, and the future. What do you think about the Libertarian Party? Where do you think the Libertarian Party is going? And I know that things like this might seem a little bit jumbled and mangled, but really it's just to give an overview. It's just to call it as you see it, and it's not so much about trying to just say, I know the best candidate, and let's force that candidate on the rest of the world. Not exactly. This is much more about, let's look at everything, and what do we see? Alright, well that's all for me now, and until next time.